going to move on to the next segment in the agenda, and that is going to be all about onboarding. So I guess Amy and Trionne are standing by and ready to jump in here. It's nice when the technology works. By the way, we have Learngistics again in the background being our producer on this event. So thank goodness for them that they're controlling all that, because facilitating the discussions and then running that. There's at least two people from Learngistics, a few people from our team behind the scenes. And sorry, before I jump into the onboarding, I did a very poor job of mentioning that the chat is open. We are using more or less the chat component in terms of comments you would like to share, even questions. I will try to take a glance at it along the way. We have a very tight agenda in terms of content that we're covering, so we may not get to specific questions, but if I see sort of a theme of things going on there, I will sort of try to throw it on the table. So welcome, Trionne, Amy. So we're going to talk all about onboarding, and maybe the best place to start, I should have done the last segment, is to ask you to introduce yourselves, and then that gives our audience a bit of context as to where you come from in this conversation, and then we'll jump right in. Go ahead, Amy, if you want to start. You're at the top of my screen.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed the last session, and I put a little information about an event Jeff's running in Toronto next week as well in the chat. So chats are so fun when you run these sessions. I'm Amy Davies. I run a business called First 30. We really specialize in employee onboarding, so you come to the right place for this conversation, and outplacement as well. Some of you will know us for that. And I'm writing my second book right now called Creating a Praise Culture.
Thanks, Amy. Trionne?
Hi, my name is Trionne. I've been in the L&D landscape for over 15 years now. Started off in wellness and evolved more into the HR space and supporting HR teams with that. I'm currently an HR business partner in private healthcare as well. So I definitely am still enjoying my L&D experiences and what I bring there to the table, and then growing as a business partner as well.
Thanks, Trionne. And Trionne, you may be familiar with Trionne. She's been a friend and partner of Thorpe Benefits for many years, going way back to when we originally launched our wellness services.
Easy there, Roger. Not way back.
No.
You
just
know,
relatively speaking.
Yeah.
Yes. So good place to start, I guess, is to really just reemphasize, and maybe I'll go to you, Amy, first, in terms of, it's probably an obvious question, and that is, why is onboarding so important? And effectively, sort of, what is the true business case for that? So if we're not doing it, or we're not doing it very well, HR people were probably thinking that we could do better. So taking that project to their team and saying, well, let's do this. How do they position that business case effectively?
Sure. It's a really great question. And it's such a funny thing. I'm sure people here today can relate. It's like the one thing that businesses are more than willing to admit they do really badly. But when the rubber hits the road, they seem to be less willing to fix. And I think the big reason is because we have not really known how to make the case for onboarding, because we think, oh, our employees we don't give them the best experience. They need and want to be here, so they'll forgive us. But here's the problem. And those of you who know me well have probably heard me talk about this before. But we have a cognitive response to any new stimulus, and that is called imprinting. So when we engage with anything new, a new restaurant, a new person, that's why we talk about first impressions. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression. And a new business, we are going through this rapid learning process cognitively. And that's something that as humans, we've depended upon for our survival since our invention. So it's certainly not something that's going to change when we when we join a new business. So once we have imprinted, and we are imprinting on those very first experiences, like the first day, does someone greet me on time? Do I have the tools I need to do my job? Am I feeling bad? Like, do I feel uncomfortable? We build a belief system. And once a belief system is established, it can be very difficult, if not impossible, to change. Like we were talking about new technology in the last session. we're afraid of change. We don't like change as humans. There's a great book called The Catalyst, which I recommend. It's about how to change anyone's mind. And it talks about why we resist change and how to get people to overcome it. And imprinting and belief systems are one of the reasons we are so afraid of change, and it is so difficult to change people's minds. But very quickly, the other, making the case, you have to talk numbers to CFOs who are going to be the ones to allocate resource and money. So looking, and we can talk more about it later, but looking at the cost to the business, not only in new hire turnover, which is generally very high because most businesses are not good at onboarding. And those are the hard costs, but also the soft costs like engagement and productivity.
So there is a financial business case when you think about it, as the fact that if you're not doing it well, and you're right, we probably just sort of diminish that first impression comes, and if not done well is gone. Poof, we've missed our chance, right? So, but if we do it really well, wow, we are really improving the odds of retention and probably the reputation of our business, because when someone starts off well, they tell their friends, well, look at how I've been greeted. Look at how I'm off to a great start. I've met a bunch of people. I've been introduced. I've got everything I need. They had a game plan of projects ready for me. So, we can't all be ready for everything. But I guess that sort of goes to, if you want to jump on this one, Amy, as well, is what are some of those low cost, no cost ideas? So to keep the CFOs relatively happy, is that what could we implement on onboarding that isn't necessarily going to break the bank for us?
Yeah, and this one can cost a little money, but I'll give a few that really don't cost anything. You just mentioned it, so I thought it would be a good one. Like, think about all the posts you see with people posting their swag that they get from their employer when they first start. People love swag because it makes them feel like they belong. They're not outside now, they're inside. And when they see everyone else with swag and they don't have any, they're going to feel like an outsider. So even low cost swag that you can get them, a mug. I have my little First 30 mug here. I feel so part of First 30
Who
now.
gave that to you? That's
I
nice.
know. I had to gift it to myself. So that can be a really good way. But one of the simplest and my very favorite way to help people onboard successfully and imprint positively, let them start late and leave early on their first day or their first few days. They might be coming to a new place. They might have to set up technology. You as a man, like your managers might need time to get settled for the day and like get their coffee and then get their emails out of the way. So that's such a simple way, if your business can tolerate it, for you to really welcome your new hire when you're fresh and they're fresh, because they're not scrambling to get there. Other small ways is to create an acronym list. You'll be surprised who wants that acronym list. That really helps with belonging. When it comes to benefits, Roger, I'm sure you talk to your clients about this. I started a job, and this is shame on me. So I didn't know my benefits didn't activate for 3 months. And so that was a real shock to me. And I found out that's something I could have negotiated. I was a single mom to 2 small kids. That immediately, like, I ended up having a really good experience with the business, but that was one small thing. Like, why can't I make this change now? This is really an uncomfortable 3 months for me if something goes wrong with my kids. So making sure people understand their benefits, because that's part of their physical and their family's physical safety. And other little things like be on time to greet them. But the last one I'm going to bring up, because I think it's so important. Jeff was talking about disabilities, and as I said, he has an event coming up. I learned this at his event, is don't just ask about accommodations one time. Ask about accommodations again and again and again, because if someone has an invisible disability, they might not want to tell you because they might not know that you're going to be accepting of it. But if you continue to ask if they need accommodations, let them say no 10 times for them to say yes the 11th time, but continue to ask.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. It's interesting you talk about sort of the ongoing component of onboarding. There is a tail to this. And I think of Trionne's experience with learning and development, is that's kind of naturally where it moves into, is here's what we're going to be providing you and giving you to succeed. And here's what we're going to invest in you beyond that. And Trionne also has a unique experience, of course, in that she's like us in terms of the wellness world. understood how to onboard and open up people to the offerings around healthy living and what an organization is doing to support that healthy living. Do you want to, Trionne, talk a little bit about how that fits in to the setting the tone of a health and like a well-being culture? And then maybe where does that head in terms of where health education, health initiatives fit into L&D? We actually did a whole roundtable on this before. It was interesting to see how that is weaving into the L&D conversation. So that's a lot, but I'm throwing that at you to start with.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, wellness can tie in very easily to L&D, but I would say where to start integrating that into the onboarding journey, the employee life cycle, is the pre-hire, the pre-boarding, the pre-hire, get the messaging out there. It mirrors what Amy's talking about. It should be in your postings. It should be on your social media. Hopefully there's mention of some of your wellness initiatives in, your ratings, your reviews, your Indeed reviews, whatever that might be. So ideally, if you're doing something well, you should back it up and provide that information as soon as possible before they even, get to the first screen.
Right.
In terms of integrating it into the ongoing journey, wellness ties in very nicely with leadership development and training, and that whole idea of the voice of the organization, the culture of the organization. And one easy way to tie it in is when you are doing training development, like communications learning, how to managerial leadership tactics, EQ training. These things are seen as soft skills in learning development, but very easily part of wellness too. So it's a very nice way to start, and it starts to develop your leadership at your managerial levels so that they can infuse it throughout the culture as well.
So I guess, again, it's all about setting the tone of what we have available to you. Like I always think of, when someone comes away from that first day, what was it like? What did they say? Well, you want them to come home and say, wow, I can't believe what they've got prepared for us and how they support us as a family. And, you spoke to that, Amy, is that it's not just about the employee. And that's where this is interesting from a loyalty factor is letting employee know that you're going to be looking to invest and take care of them and their family, because a lot of the health issues integrate and affect the employee either way, wherever it's happening in the family. So, and then it goes beyond that as to here's how we're going to, invest in your learning and development. So, Amy, maybe you could speak a little bit to, we talked a little bit about this before, probably more than we expected in terms of tools, HR tools, HRS technology. How does that fit for you in terms of the onboarding process and beyond?
I love this conversation because HRIS is not built for that. Not all of them anyway. And I think that I don't think they mean any harm. They say they have onboarding modules. Their onboarding modules are no more than a checklist. And that's what most HR folks will find when they dig into what's available to them. More programs are being built. We're in the process of building an AI tool that's an onboarding buddy that I'm excited about, that I'll go to these HRAS and see if we can act as a module that can be part of the marketplace for those. But there's not a lot of companies have invested in exploring onboarding as a solution for companies. So this is something new. So I'm pretty excited about it. But the onboarding HRS is a really good they're really good at managing workforce administration. So that can play into onboarding. But I think in the last session you were talking about people have to know how to use it.
Right.
But the other very underutilized tool for employee onboarding, well, one is email sequencing. We're just about to launch a course as well about how to build an onboarding program. We talk about email sequencing. It's a whole topic in and of itself in that course, but it's really kind of a good way to take admin away from HR and then make it an automated, repeatable process that you can modify over time. And every day or 2 days, in their first 30 days anyway, a new hire will get an email from HR with a new topic. Because I think one thing that we do is we try to give our employees everything at once. So what happens is we end up overwhelming them with information, and memories are fragile. They're like a sieve. Think about a person, they're nervous, they're excited, they're meeting a ton of new people, and then they're like getting this avalanche of information. So we say, turn it into a babbling brook of information and send them like benefits. We're here, I always think benefits when I look at you, Roger, but when we are thinking about our benefits, have one email. Here is how to file your first benefit claim. And then I'm sure some of the providers you work with, Roger, have task-based videos to teach people, because I'm going to be super embarrassed if I have to go to my manager and be like, hey, I have to file a benefits claim for my orthotics, or maybe something far more embarrassing. Could you give me a hand? So that's one thing to consider. But the other underutilized tool are managers, right? HR are amazing. Like, they try to do it all. But when it comes, I've heard some of our clients and in our community, people saying, oh, well, we make onboarding optional for our managers. Like, if you're rebuilding the program, make managers some of the people that you get feedback from, give them a survey to fill out, create a small committee. That it doesn't have to be too sophisticated, but check in as you're going through the process, because they're far more likely to be using tools that they've helped to create and a program they've helped to create. And the final thing I'll say on this is that your managers don't want to be blindsided. They don't want things going on that they knew nothing about. It embarrasses them. And this might be the first time they hired someone in 4 years, so they don't know, and they don't know what the program is. Make sure they have a manager guide, and that they'll know and they don't feel foolish, right?
That's great. And actually, that manager issue, I just want to ask Trionne about that, because that could be the sort of the maker or breaker of the delivery of these programs and offerings, because they are the closest to that employee. So if the manager is completely disconnected with what's being offered or how resources are available, it's also don't you agree, Trionne, that it's also a factor of, we're going to talk about this actually later in our last session, which is about giving that employee the permission or the endorsement to take advantage of these resources, where, you know how it's in some organizations, it's, oh yeah, that's over there, but just use that if you need it or if you have time for it, right? So the underlying message is, don't use it, right? Or if you use it, we're going to be very surprised. So no wonder we have very low utilization, especially, right, Trionne, on certain wellness offerings, because it's kind of there's a disconnected message there. Can you speak to that?
For sure. I think that comes down to, is it viewed as a checklist item or something that you really want to imbue into your culture? So I think that's first and foremost. And the question to that is, how do you get buy-in? How do you show your managers that there is value? And you may already have some data, somewhere in the ether. Maybe you have some high turnover rates, a lot of sick days that are leading to high turnover, but there's something that you can grab and show something's not right, and give them some idea of what you could do. You don't want to tie it to end organizational metrics, but there's some idea of what could be. And from an HR standpoint as well, there's that aspect of supporting the manager and making it as easy as possible. So Amy mentioned doing a checklist for the general managers, so you can embed that in that checklist, the messaging, tactics, any kind of sequencing, whether it's email or other delivery methods. Definitely that should be part of the messaging coming from the manager and leadership. And hopefully you want them to show it too, right? Not just talk it, but show it, walk it.
Yes.
Do the thing.
Yes, demonstrate it. And as you said, Amy, there's some sequencing or there's some automation that would probably keep you on track, but you can customize in between. Or managers can certainly then incorporate that into their one-to-ones and their dialogue with employees, right? Beyond just the templated email that comes out. So it gives it a bit more life. Can you talk to me a little bit, Amy, more about sort of like that? I guess the sequencing is interesting to me. Is there's a balance between too much at the beginning spreading it out too long? Like, do you actually have some practical sort of thoughts on sort of the timelines or the cadence for that communication?
Yeah, so I think that 30 days is like to me a rite of passage. So if you have an email sequencing or you have a platform that they're using, 30 days is probably when they can graduate from engaging on every few day or every day basis and start, getting out from under that but you've made it so exciting that they don't feel like they're getting out from under it. That's a huge
Right.
opportunity. But I think that 30 days and then it's probably going to go to about 90 days, but everyone learns at a different pace. That's why I think it's really important for HR folks to understand the learning curve. And because we all go through this learning process, and to act as a coach also to managers and guide them through the learning curve and help them understand when their employee might be feeling insecure, and prompt them, like look for the prompts that will tell them, like someone who was really loud when they started, like they suddenly go very quiet. Okay, so something is
Hmm.
not quite right. So what questions can you ask? What guidance can you provide through this process? So the learning curve is out there. I'll put my LinkedIn in here after a few people are asking questions. You're welcome to reach out and I can share these resources with you.
Sure.
But this will really help because you can do all the right things with your onboarding program. And then someone is like going through that unconscious or conscious incompetence phase of the learning curve. And they're like, I don't know anything and I'm never going to learn. So it can be a longer process for some, a shorter process for others. This is why check-ins by managers and HR are so, so important. I'm a big believer in stay interviews, if you've heard of those, and stay interview approaches. I'm not saying give someone a stay interview after their onboarding process, but incorporating stay interview type questions into check-ins can be so meaningful because you can really understand where they're at and how you might be able to best support them through the process. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's good. I just thought there might be some specifics in that. Trionne, we talk a lot in the well-being area on how to measure success. And it's certainly I'm wondering just from an onboarding standpoint, do you think I mean, the measurements would be important at the very beginning to determine whether there's something going wrong that we need to deal with? Like, what are those red flags that say we need to improve onboarding? So I guess those are the same measurements in a way as to what is telling us that we need to do better. But also, once we're doing onboarding, can we measure whether it's having impact or not? Maybe the two of you can speak to it, certainly Trionne, from a wellness delivery standpoint. And Amy, you can speak to it maybe from an overall standpoint. Trionne,
Sure.
do you want to
Well,
start with
maybe
that?
so I'll start with the L&D or wellness standpoint.
Yeah.
You certainly want to, from beginning to end, develop your alignment. So in terms of the initiatives that you're going to bring in, how ultimately does that tie to the org metrics, as we all know, but really breaking that down along the way into increments. So, what are competencies you want to affect? What's the value proposition? What are the KPIs that are going to be affected? And I think one of the main takeaways in this is you don't want to make the commitment very big. So if you're going to do, you're going to do A, don't commit to it improving revenue or decreasing turnover. You want to pick small metrics that can change rapidly over time. Things as simple as engagement or the change in number of sick days, those kinds of things. So you can start to show the essence of value or trends. That's what you want to do. And ultimately, no matter what, you want to work on being data driven. And you may not be very sophisticated in that, but any kind of data that you can start accumulating, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, like surveys or actual numbers, whatever you got, start it, because it starts the conversation with your managers and starts to give the program, whatever you're doing, more validity.
And I think you spoke to the fact that it has to be realistic measurements, something that you can track that truly can correlate. So just wanted to reemphasize that. Amy, any thoughts on overall onboarding measurement, success measurement?
Yeah, Trionne made such a great point about like dig into the data that you already have. You're probably already running engagement surveys. The most boring fact about me is that I spent 20 years in research before I started First 30, so employee and consumer research. And we really underutilize the research that we have. So you can take your engagement data, cut it by new hires, compare, like do that before you launch your onboarding program. Look at their level of engagement. Once you've launched their the new onboarding program, after a year or so, cut the data again by all the new hires that experience your onboarding program and see if their engagement has improved. So that's one way. You can look at retention and new hire turnover. You can calculate the cost. I like to say 30 to 50% of an employee salary to replace them. You can see how much less turnover you've had, how much it's costing the business. The reason I say 30 to 50% is that's believable. It could be up to 100, 200, but your CFO is not going to believe that, and they're going to think it's inflated. So just look at 30 to 50%. So there's many, many ways. Like you can look at the research will tell us that it improves productivity by 70% when you have a great onboarding program. Hard to measure, but you can take that engagement data and cut it and do it that way. And then it improves new hire turnover. I think the number is like 82%, which seems very high to me, but I'm not going to argue with that data because it makes the case for the work we do. But I mean, you look at other data sources as well for that information.
Just to wrap this up, I think I'm thinking of an overall sort of observation about onboarding, and that would be, I would certainly want to go back to that employee after a certain number of days and say, how has that experience been for you? So not so much as a survey, but was it good for you, or could we have done something better? Because they're going to tell you, right? Say, yeah, you know what, there could have been a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that, and before you know it, you can add that to your procedure, in effect, right? As opposed to, I guess, what people get caught in is just doing it on the fly, right? So, yeah, I think honest feedback from people, and then on the as it goes on, continuous check-in, which is a no-brainer from an HR point of view, is trying to invest the time to meet with people one-to-one to check in. So much of what we see in the benefit and wellness world is that we have to repeat, remind in terms of resources, and certainly demonstrate that those resources are there to be used. And we encourage people to use them, not discourage them to do that. So this has been great. I think for most people, it is truly a matter of either rebuilding their process or improving what's there, going to early new employees and asking them, how did we do and how can we do better? That's certainly a way to go. So yeah, I think we should probably sum it up right there and cap that off. Thank you so much, Amy and Trionne. Lots of practical ideas for people to go back and apply. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.